Night.
So before you came on, I mentioned that you interviewed with Rabbi Justin Pines last week, who himself is a superstar, and that tonight at 8 p.m. on JBS, there'll be a premiere interview with Rav Avi about the Haggadah. An email went out to the shul about about an hour ago for anyone who receives those. So if you don't have JBS on your TV or you can't make it for whatever reason, at 9 o'clock it will be available on their YouTube link. And I am very excited to watch.
hmm And I'm very grateful to Shuli, who really put a lot of time into the Haggadah. And so, what I'd like to do is spend some time this week and next week on the Haggadah. And Estelle, did I say hello to you yet? No. Hi, Estelle. How are the kids in Rehovot?
Oh, you're muted, Estelle. You're muted. Estelle, we can't hear you. Can you unmute yourself? Sorry. Let me try again to ask you to do it. Do you see a message there?
Mm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, now I was saying that my son and daughter-in-law are coming for Pesach. They
Oh,
managed to
wonderful.
come, so we will be together.
Make sure to pick up a Haggadah, Estelle.
Yeah, Thursday we'll go to Stephen's class and it'll be there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
Great.
yeah,
We'll both get one.
Yeah.
that's
right.
right.
And make sure everybody to try to listen to Rav Stephen this Shabbat, and I'm sure it's going to be on Zoom afterwards.
That's
This year
correct.
Passover falls on Saturday night, so the Shabbat HaGadol class is generally given Shabbat afternoon before Passover, but now it would be just a few hours before the Seder. It's not a simple time, so it's pushed back a week. And there's something about Rav Stephen's Shabbat HaGadol talks, about all of his talks, that are just out of this world. Out of this world, not only the thought, the thinking, but as we all know, the artistic poetry of language is just unbelievable. So I would like to spend a little time now on the Haggadah, but we generally focus on the stuff that appears before the meal. And now I'd like to focus on what happens at the end of the meal and after the meal. And we're going to begin from the last thing that is eaten at the Seder. And the last food eaten at the Seder is the afikomen, which is actually a Greek term. But the afikomen is that piece of matzah that was set aside that the children were supposed to find. Now that occurred all the way in the beginning of the Seder. You remember that there are 3 matzot, and the middle matzah is broken, and one half is set aside, and it's the afikomen, and it's that half which is the last food that we eat after the meal before we say thank you to God for our food. So I wanted to say something about that last piece because it kind of is the segue. It's the introduction to what's soon going to be happening, and that is shifting from the past story to our role in bringing about a future redemption. Egypt is the past redemption, it's the past freedom, and we're looking for a better time and how we need that time, not only for Israel, but for the larger world. The matzah is the one symbol that represents both slavery and freedom. Most of the rituals represent one of the two, but not both. For example, moror, the bitter herbs. Well, that ritually is the symbol of the bitterness that we experienced in Egypt. The drinking of wine, on the other hand, is the symbol of freedom. The matzah is the ritual food, which represents both, because matzah, which is also called lechem oni, the poor person's bread, was the food we ate when we were slaves in Egypt. Matzah was our diet. We weren't given regular food, lechem oni, matzah. And interestingly enough, when we were leaving Egypt, and we certainly hoped that finally we'd be able to eat some real bread, but we were leaving so quickly, there was not enough time for the dough to ferment. And so we ate matzah. And in that sense, matzah also became the symbol of freedom. So within the matzah is the matsui. It's what one finds, what is descriptive. It's kind of the code word, matzah, for the whole Mitzrayim story. In fact, matzah sounds like Mitzrayim. Mem, tzadik, and the hey. There's a science of exegesis that even letters, not only that sound the same, that look the same, have similarities, all of that is at work. And so the matzah represents both. And so at the beginning of the Seder, we take one whole piece of matzah and we split it in half. And one half is going to remain on the table as we tell the story of our exodus from Egypt. And the other half is hidden. It's not on the table when we tell the past story. It's only retrieved at the end of the meal when we're about ready to tell the story or to offer the prayer that there be a future redemption. Interestingly, half the matzah remains on the table. It almost is it represents the past story, and the other half awaits us at the end of the meal before we start telling the story of the future redemption. And each half within the matzah represents the story of from darkness to light. Now, no one can split a matzah in perfect half. It's impossible. And so the question arose, well, if I split the matzah, which half, the smaller half, I realize that's an oxymoron. Does the smaller half remain on the table and the larger half is reserved for the end, or the reverse? And the ruling is that the larger piece is the one that we put aside for the future redemption. And the reason for that is that as great as the past redemption was and is to be celebrated, the hope is that the future redemption will be even greater. And we're experiencing a little bit of that in our own lifetime. When one thinks of redemptive movements, I'm thinking now of the Soviet Jewry movement. 3 million Jews trapped behind the Iron Curtain. I mean, who would have ever dreamt then in the late 60s? Who would have dreamt that one day the Soviet Union will fall and over 2 million Jews will exit? We saw that happen. That exodus, on some level, rivaled even in numbers the exodus from Egypt. Or when you think about the freedom of Ethiopian Jews. Now, there are all kinds of issues in the integration of Ethiopian Jews, of Jews from the former Soviet Union into Israel. But today, Ethiopian Jews, with all the issues, they still remain. There's been such advances. I become emotional when I think about our Black brothers and sisters playing a very important role in the Army, some of the best athletes, best fighters. And the real test of integration is marriage. And our Black brothers and sisters and white brothers and sisters are marrying each other. It's quite extraordinary. Israel's a young country. When we compare, for example, Israel and Israel's absorption of Black people to what happened in America, Black people were taken in the bowels of ships to become slaves. In Israel, they were flown on the wings of El Al to freedom. So it's not as if when we're talking about the hope for present and future redemption, that's a fly in the night. No, I'm not baying at the moon. It's real. It's something that we have seen with our own eyes in the present. And with all that's happening in France, and in the past, all that's happening in Argentina, and even in America, Israel is there. That potential exodus, if necessary, is there. I'm very beholden to America. Just let me say something very personal. For many years as the rabbi, I never said the prayer for the American government. I was a flaming right-wing person in Israeli politics. I was the rabbi who supported the Machteret. That was, on my part, a terrible mistake. And I'm still very much on the right, but I was on the extreme right. And I felt, and I still feel at times, that there was often what can be called the American abandonment of Israel. I didn't like when Carter was selling F-15 advanced fighter jets to Saudi Arabia, then the enemy of Israel. I didn't like when Reagan was selling AWACS, if you remember, in the beginning of the 80s to Saudi Arabia. I was a student of the great Shmuel Katz. Maybe Estelle has heard his name. He's the one who wrote those 2 big volumes on Jabotinsky. And I was a student of his, and I'm proud of. I'm still a student of his, and so I was in the right wing, in the tough world, and I felt there were times, and I wrote about it, the American abandonment of Israel, sort of a la when David Wyman wrote the story of during the Shoah, the American abandonment of the Jews. Now, of course, no two things are absolutely similar. But then as I matured in my 40s and 50s, I wasn't a kid, I began to realize, of course, I have all kinds of questions, but Hakarat HaTov, one has to offer recognition to America for all that America has done for Jews. This has been one of the most receptive, receiving and embracing of Jews in our history. Our history is that we've been thrown out of virtually every country that we've gone to in time. First, we're accepted, and after we're accepted, then we were pushed out of virtually every country. There may be some minor exceptions. And I thought America deserves that credit, and I began saying that prayer. Not that it makes a difference in the larger scheme of things. And I really felt that Hakarat HaTov. But if I were to be asked today, what is the future for Jews in America? I'm not sure. I am no longer sure of that future. And that's been my arc. What I do know is that with all my heart and soul, Israel will always, God willing, with everyone's help and with God's help, with Sahal's help, Israel will always be here, always ready to receive Jews as an insurance policy from throughout the world. And that's why we eat that afikomen at the end of the Seder. It's sort of like the conductor of an orchestra. I love music, and when you see the conductor kind of lift his hands right before the orchestra is making its unified sound. There's a silence in the whole theater. But as Dr. Michael Fishbane, my son's Rebbe and mentor, as he's written, there's a silence which is empty, and there's a silence that's pregnant with meaning. And when that conductor lifts his hands and the not sure what it's called, you'll remind me. There's something about that moment. It's like this introductory moment. It's like the Talmud that says, Chasidim harishonim hayu shoin shoachat u'palavim. The most important part of prayer is not when we begin the words of prayer, but when we sit down, remove the clutter, try to sit in a quiet, meditative mode, and just it's that moment of preparation. Sometimes that preparation and the final preparation is the key. And so we eat the matzah at the end. And that's the statement that one day soon, V'haya bayom ahu, the prophet says, on that great day, we're going to see the incoming of our people from all over the world, the freedom of our people, and ultimately the freedom and the peace of the whole world. And with that, after we eat the afikomen, and that is part of the Seder that is called tzafun. Tzafun means hidden. But there are other words for hidden. For example, Seter is hidden, or Chet Bet Aleph. There are other more commonly used words. Why do we use tzafun? And doing a study of all of Tanakh, and these days that's not hard, you just press a button. Every time you find the sound tzafun, tzafun, it's a hiddenness that relates to the dawn of a new day, always in some way. For example, when Moses was born, he was born prematurely, and he was hidden because at that time there was the decree that all boys who were born would be thrown into the rivers so that they be killed, and they couldn't fight for Israel if Israel ever revolted against Egypt. This was, of course, the decree of Pharaoh. The language is vatitzpenehu. His mother hid him, his sister hid him for 3 months. Vatitzpenehu, tzafun. Or the prophet says, mitzafon tipatach ra'ah. This is a Tova type of idea. From the north, the evil which will turn into the good will come. Tzafon. Tzafon sounds like tzafun. And with that, we say the grace after meal. And in the Haggadah Yehi Or, we try to show how the grace after meal, its flow, is the embodiment of the whole Exodus story, from the negatives to the positives. But if you wish, you could take a look at it and study that part. But right after we bench, after the Birkat HaMazon, we invite Elijah in. That's the first thing we do. Now, let me say something a little deeper. Every part of the Seder is part of a particular portion of the Seder. There's Kadesh. Kadesh is the Kiddush. There's Urchatz. We wash our hands without a blessing. There's Karpas. It's kind of a light moror. There is Yachatz, which we spoke about, the splitting of the matzah. And when one thinks about that moment when we opened the door for Elijah, it's not part of any part of the Seder. It's not part of the Birkat HaMazon of the benching. That's over with. In fact, we've already recited a blessing over wine, celebrating the present, or celebrating what we've just said in the Birkat HaMazon. And it's not part of the Hallel, which is about ready to occur, but it's not occurring. It's just there. It's in a vacuum. It's like lost. Where is it? And that very much is reflective of Elijah in the prophets. In the book of Kings, Elijah comes from nowhere. He is the only prophet about whom we do not have any pedigree. We don't know who his father was. We don't know who his mother was. Unlike Yeshayahu, unlike Yirmiyahu, unlike Yecheskel, we don't know who his father was, who his mother was. And indeed, he's all over the place. He's jumping from the north to the south, to the east, to the west. He's constantly on the move. Maybe he was on, maybe there was, I don't know, maybe he had I'm sorry, I'm blocking the term when you're on the spectrum. Who knows? Maybe he was on the spectrum, because people on the spectrum can make great contributions. One thing for sure, when God speaks to him, he says, "How are you doing, Elijah?" And Elijah says, "Kano kineti, I am zealous for the Lord. Va'ivater anochi levadi," or is it va'ivater? I'm the only one left. God, I'm the only one who believes in you. I always have problems when somebody says, "I'm the only one." When somebody says, "I'm the only one," beware, duck. What do you mean you're the only one? But that's what he said. He was a kanoi. And God says to Elijah, that's not the way redemption's going to come. God is not in the ruach. God is not in the earthquake. God is not in the Aish. He's not in the fire. That's not God. God is not in the Rash, in the Sa'ara, in the Kolot. God is in the Kol Demama Daka, the soft voice. And indeed, while Elijah was an Elijah who was a zealot, there is another side to Elijah's personality. And that is the side which is discussed by Malachi, where Malachi, the prophet, one of the last prophets, he says 3 days before the Messiah comes, we read this always on the Shabbat before Passover, Hine Anochi Sholech Lachem et Eliyah Hanavi. I'm going to send to you Elijah the prophet. Veheshiv levavot al banim ubanim al avotam. And he's going to bring together parents and children. Whatever road, whatever path, whatever journey a child is taken, even if it's different than my path, I have to be there and love and be supportive of my child's decision. That's a different side to Elijah's personality. And indeed, I remember giving a class on Shabbat HaGadol showing that the Elijah of the prophets, when he lived, he was an Elijah who was zealous. He was a kanoi. But post his death, in the Talmud, for example, Elijah is the one whom you find dressed in a poor person's garments, and he's always showing up, and he's always there to help people precisely when they need some help the most. He's offering not a harsh word, always a soft word. And when there is a controversy and we don't know how the controversy will be solved, the Gemara says, Teku, tishbi yitaretz kushiot va'abayot. Elijah is going to respond to the questions and to the answers. That's a different Elijah. That's the soft Elijah. That's the picture of Elijah. And we open the door for Elijah. Now, when we open the door for Elijah, we then say the following, Shefoch chamatcha ala goyim. Pour out your wrath against the nations. Now, when one thinks of the two Elijahs that I've just described, Elijah 1 and Elijah 2. That seems to be referring to Elijah 1. These are very, very tough words. I'll read it to you. These are words from the Psalms, but they're very, very tough words. Here's what it says. Pour your wrath upon the nations that did not know you, and upon the kingdoms that did not call you, that did not call upon your name. For they have consumed Jacob and laid waste his habitation. Pour out your fury upon them, and the fierceness of your anger shall reach them. You will pursue them with anger and eradicate them from under the heavens of the Lord. Those are fighting words, tough words. And as a matter of fact, I read somewhere that my friend Shlomo Kalbach used to write and say, Shpoch ahavatcha el hagoyim, spread your love to the nations. And in deference to him, I did a study and I looked, is there any such text? And there is no such text. It says, Shpoch chamatcha. That's what it says. We opened the door for Elijah. Again, why are we opening the door for Elijah? Because he's supposed to herald in the future redemption, and that's what the Seder is about after the meal. And then we say these harsh words. Now, on its simple level, the reason we say these harsh words, I believe historically, is that after the Seder, people were a little bit exhausted after having recited the commentaries before the meal and the meal. They were, they had a sumptuous meal. And so they wanted a little bit of fresh air. So they go to the door and they open the door. And what you find in some of the manuscripts is they would look down on the floor, on the ground, and they would see a dead Christian child. And they knew that that was the beginning of the blood libel, because that was the time, and we'll see that it wasn't just that time, but that was the time when Christians claimed that Jews were murdering Christian children in order to take their blood and with their blood bake the matzot, or with the blood color the wine red. And when we would look down on the ground and see that child, as much as we wanted to embrace Elijah with love, our immediate reaction was, the reaction was fury. It was a reaction of anger that couldn't be controlled. Destroy our enemies. And the truth is that we are seeing modern blood libels, not just of one child, but of many. This is, of course, the claims that we're hearing during this war, where we're hearing constantly of how we are, the IDF, the IAF, how we're murdering Palestinian children. In other words, what's being said here is that we are the murderers of these children, when in fact, with all my heart and soul, I believe, it's beyond the fact that we all know that these children, they hide behind children, these so-called, they're not even terrorists, they're worse than terrorists. They hide behind children. But basically what it comes down to is, excuse my language now, but Menachem Begin used to say this. He said this after Sabra and Shatila, which is for another discussion, but he said, Goyim kill Goyim and they blame Jews. That was his line. That was Begin. Begin was straight. Goyim kill Goyim and they blame us. And when you think about it, I mean, it's happened so often. We're blamed for killing the children that they themselves have killed. There would have been no attack against Gaza if there would have been no October 7th. And so the blood libel that precipitated this Shpoch Hamatcha is alive, and is it well and well. And so we open the door for Elijah, and here's the key. This is one of the keys to the Seder, to what's about ready to happen. And that is opening the door. Why do we have to open the door for Elijah? This is something that I've shared with you in the past, but I want to spend a little bit more time on it. Why do we have to open the door? If Elijah has no moorings, he has no roots, the Elijah of the prophets is jumping from place to place. And certainly he's jumping all over the world. He is like a Superman, faster than the speed of a bullet. He flies across the Atlantic Ocean from Europe to the United States to South America. He's moving quickly, and he is drinking all of this wine. He's sipping wine. I know my uncle Sroka at our table used to shake the table, and then he would say, "Don't you see there's less wine in the cup of Elijah?" So he just had a little drink. I once caught him shaking the table, and I was devastated because I always thought Elijah was actually drinking the wine. But for a moment, he's drinking all this wine. I mean, he's a miraculous figure. Why do we have to open the door? And I want to turn our attention for a moment to the Song of Songs, chapter 5. In the Song of Songs, Shuli, if you can find it in Sefaria, it's chapter 5 of the Song of Songs, my dear Shuli. And we didn't prepare this, but it just came to me now. Now, the Song of Songs, when is it read? It's always read on Passover. That is a love story of the spring. That's why this is not only the festival of freedom of Passover, but it's the spring festival. Even in Rochester, it's going to be spring. Even in Chicago and in New York, it's going to be beautiful, and the trees are going to start blossoming. And it's a romantic story of lovers who are walking through the gardens and the trees. Let's take a look at sentence 2. From sentence 2, let's see what it says. Ani yeshena. This is gorgeous. Everyone must see this. I am sleeping. V'libi air. But my heart is stirring. In other words, the lover is in his or her bed. Kol dodi dofek. The voice of my beloved is knocking at the door. In other words, I hear a knock at the door, but I'm in my bed. And the voice calls out, Pitchili, open the door. Achoti, my sister, Rayati, my beloved, Yonati, my dav, Tamati, my whole one, Sheroshi nimlotal, my head is full of dew, Kfutsotav Rasise Laila. I await you. Please open the door, my dear beloved. Let me enter. And let's see what happens in the next few sentences. As I'm hearing the knocking of the door, this is so poetic. The lover in the bed says, Pashatiti et kutanti. I already took off my day clothes. Eichocha el bashena. How am I expected now to get dressed? Rachatzti et raglai. I've taken my shower. I've already washed my feet. Eichocha atanfeim. I should get up and walk to the door, and I'm going to dirty my feet. That's the response. The response to the lover of open up the door, I'm ready for you, is I just can't. And by the way, the subtext is that this is not just a story of two people, lover and beloved. It's a story of the love between God and his people. And God is knocking at the door, and God says to the Jewish people, Tam Yisrael, open the door, open the door. All you've got to do is open the door. I'm here. The Messiah is here. And according to this text, we say, how can I do that? I can't sully myself. And then it says, Dodi sholach yodo min hachor. My beloved, he took his hand off the lock. Umei hamu olav, and my heart began to stir for him. In other words, in this sentence, the beloved, God sees that there's no response. So he takes his hands off the handle of the door and he leaves. Next sentence. Finally, the lover in the bed says, Kamti ani liftoach dodi. Is this gorgeous or is this gorgeous? It's so sad though. I then rose to open the door for my beloved. V'yadai natfu more. But my hands were dripping with myrrh. Before we go to sleep, we put on all kinds of salves. So when I try to open the door to quickly say, don't leave, don't leave. That's botai more. And my fingers were filled of myrrh. Over al kapota manul. I started to twist the knob, but my hands were so slippery. It kept slipping. I tried to open it, and the knob wasn't opening. And now the next sentence, a sad sentence. Patachti ani lidodi. Finally, I opened the door for my beloved. Vidodi chamak ava. But my beloved had turned away and gone. And then it says, Nafshi yatsa bidabro bikashtihu velo mitzatihu krativ velo anani. We missed the opportunity. If I can face everyone, this text was cited by Rabbi Soloveitchik in his book, Kol Dodi Dofei. The voice of my beloved is knocking. If we want the Messiah to come, and what do I mean by the Messiah? All kinds of interpretations. For me, the Messiah is that we're working towards a better world for us and for all of humankind. If we want the Messiah to come, he's not going to come and slip through the doors on his own. We have to get up. I'm talking to myself and letting you listen because there's so much more I know, so much I've not done that I should do. We have to get up and open the door. And that is why Elijah is entering at this moment. He's not part of any particular part of the Seder because he's so all-consuming, this message. We're about ready to talk about future redemption. And what it's saying is, if you want future redemption, you could wait for the Messiah, but just remember the Messiah is waiting for us. We can yearn for redemption, but redemption is yearning for us. We can search for God, but as the great Abraham Heschel, Rabbi Heschel would say, but God is searching. God is searching for us. Now I want to add one more point. The truth of the matter is that in the Shvo Chamatcha, Elijah's name is not found. The name of Elijah is only found one time in the Haggadah. And that one time is in the Birkat HaMazon, the grace after meals, where we say, may God send to us Elijah, may his memory be for a blessing. And it's right there that we say, another Harachaman, may the merciful one help us. Ve'ishiv Harachaman hu yivarech et avi ve'imi. May the merciful one help us bless our children and grandchildren, bringing together the generations and siblings. That's the Elijah of the Yeshiv Lev Avot Banim, Ubanim al Avotam. As a matter of fact, at our Seder, when we open the door for Elijah, we add, not only do we offer the words of the Haggadah, Shvo Chamatcha, pour out your wrath, but we add the words of Malachi, the softer side of Elijah. This, in a word, is what the Haggadah is about. Again, I said this quickly in the beginning, but now I think it'll fall into place. The Haggadah before the meal is a story of a past, very real history. And then the meal itself, when we're ingesting the rituals we're saying, and we're feeling that story in the present. And after the meal, It's the story of the hope for the future, but in that hope is built in the understanding that for that era to be realized, everyone has to do their share. We must do our share and open the door. And so there you have it, just some thoughts on our movement into that future text. And next week, maybe we'll get into the Hallel. And there are actually two Hallels that will be recited. One is the Hallel we recite on the holidays, which focuses on national peace, on national redemption. Yivorech et Beit Yisrael. May God bless the house of Israel. And that moves to our saying another Hallel. It's called actually Hallel Hagadol. Odul Adonai Ki Tov. Praise the Lord, for he is good. Ki le'olam chasto. For his kindness envelops la'olam, not only Israel, but the whole world. Our concept of messianism is actually very different than many other faith communities, in that for us, the Messianic times doesn't mean that everyone is going to be Jewish. In many other faith communities, if you don't have the precise deity belief that they have, then you're damned. Judaism doesn't believe that at all. In Judaism, there's a place, a very important place, maybe even in a higher place, for Gentiles who conduct themselves in a proper way, and who, like all people, like we're challenged to live ethical and good lives. I'll stop here, and if there's anybody who has some thoughts on this.
I see Lance's hand.
Don't we say the great Hallel in Psukkah Zimrei?
We do.
And don't we say the Song of Songs before Kabbalat Shabbat?
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same idea. Shabbat is the time of, it's that one day of the week when we get a taste of what the peace is all about. And as a matter of fact, we have a prayer. The prayer is that may every day be Shabbat. That's the goal of Shabbat, that it spill over into the week. And that's why we say the Shir HaShirim before Shabbat. It's the segue into understanding that this spirit of kol dodi dofek, of responding to the call, is what Shabbat is all about.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anyone else? Bev has a comment. Beverly, can you unmute yourself? Yeah, great.
So, since time immemorial, the literature has urged people to get up and unlock the door, to move it, to get up and do something. And to this day, it's been a very big challenge to get people to do something. And the trick is, how do you wake up people and let them know it's up to them and that they have to move it? It's so discouraging when you see that it's not happening, that people are not. I think that, Rav Avi, you're doing more than your share. You're trying your best to wake up the people to do something. And for that, we love you. but I see that it's generally not happening. I think this time, with October 7th and the horror of the alternative, that more people have been awakened to the reality and to their participation. But on the overall, most people just sit there. And I commend you for not giving up, for keep on trying. And that's what it's all about, that we can't give up. We have to keep trying.
It may omically be from the depths of my heart, Bev. I see your life, and may it be for many, many more years, and Ted's life as a source of great encouragement. The way you have done more than your share in stirring others to do, including myself, is by doing yourself. Just setting the example, being the model of what it is to be there and to answer the door of Kol Dodi Dofek. And looking towards that moment when, as we say in the grace after meals, Horachaman, Hu Yanchilenu Yom Shekulo Shabbat, may the merciful one grant us to inherit the time when every day will be Shabbat, the inner meaning of Shabbat. And one could look at the world and one could be discouraged. But I look at the world, Bev, and I'm encouraged. I'm
Terrific.
deeply broken by October 7th, as we all are. But as you've heard me say many times, this has been a dark time, but a remarkable time. The way, in particular, Israel has responded. I know that there are all kinds of issues in Israel, and it's getting tougher and tougher, and about a prime minister who's very controversial. But just for a moment, the way Israel has responded, I mean, the way young people, the way, with all the issues, the way my grandson is 32 years old. He's done his service, and he's been in Lebanon for 200 days, and he's just one of thousands, and in America too. You've been there. I know that Arnie has come, and we all wish Arnie a refuah shlema. He's recuperating now.
Yes.
Arnie would come in his wheelchair. He'd walk in his wheelchair, and he'd come to these weekly, rallies that Ari and Netta that have been organized by young people. I know that it's not been easy, but there's another side to it. And there's reason, I believe there's great reason for hope. And I'm very fond of the Shimon Peres line. He was always an upper. And when he got into his 90s, he was asked, how are you always so optimistic? He says, look, optimist and pessimist die the same way. They just live differently. I choose to live as an optimist, and there's something to it. But it resonated to me when you said that, we have to do our share to get off our beds and open the door. I know in years back, my brother Mordechai, he's less than a year younger than me. He was once asked during the height of my activism, was once asked, what's the difference between you and your brother? You're so close in age. You're a rabbi. He's a rabbi. You teach Torah. He teaches Torah. So my brother said, I'll tell you, with me, it's ready, aim, fire. With my brother, talking about me, he said, it's not ready, aim, fire. It's ready, fire, aim. Ready, fire, aim. And I said, Morty, I don't mind ready, aim, fire. My problem is I don't like ready, aim, 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 aim. Genug, genug. Get off the seat and open the goddamn, excuse me, open the door. Just do it.
Yeah.
That's my brother. Anyone else? Bev, you just keep doing what you're doing for many more years. And Ted will hold on to your coat, and you'll hold on to Ted's coat. You're doing great.
Lance's hand is up
Bev,
again.
look
Yes,
what
I
you
just want to
did.
say,
Bev, look
just want
what
to say
you
that
did.
Shai
But
Bernstein's
Lance, I just
interview.
I want to say something to Bev. Look what you did. Look what you did with dysautonomia. Just that tiny thing. There's so many other things. That's no small thing, Bev. I know dysautonomia. It's in my family, as you know. And look what you've done. That basically, on some level, has been solved. And you started it. Now, others, you couldn't have done it alone. You needed others. But the way you went knocking on doors, on Coppell's doors, and that door, look what you've done, Bev. You should feel great. Judy's not here, but Judy married and she loved and she lived.
Avi, that was then. You can't live off what you did in the past. You have to keep doing. It's not enough.
Yeah,
It's not enough to say, I did.
right.
That's
Good. Look, that's why you're a great activist. You're never happy. I recently had a conversation with my grandson, Amichai. I don't know if I shared this with you. So Ilana had two of her children were in the army. One was in Miluim and the other in Sadir. Gavi, may he be safe. So his next brother, Ilana has 9. So the next one is going in very soon. So we were talking heart to heart. I'm quite close to the grandchildren, very close. And I said to him, I said, Ami, I call him Ami Chai, Ami, I wish you wouldn't be a fighter. I wish you wouldn't be a fighter. You can do something else, do intelligence, do this, do that. He says to me, Sabi Abi, I don't understand. You wanted Gilad to be a fighter, that's his older brother. You wanted Eitan. He goes through you wanted all of them to be fighters. What are you discriminating against me? I said, Amichai, that was 12, 13 years ago. That was 8 years ago. I was younger. I've done my share. Genug. And he said to me, Bev, he said to me, Sabi Abi, I love you. So I want to tell you something. You've done your share. Now I have to do my share. An 18-year-old boy says that. Every time I think about that, I get tears in my eyes. And sometimes, as we get older, we can't do what we used to do, Bev. That's okay. Yeah, but look at your next generation. Look at your next generation. I know your kids. Look at your next generation. They're changing the world. Where do you think they got it from? Nah, I'm not Makabel, Bev. You've done.
It's not enough. What you did,
Yeah.
you did. But if you're capable, you have to keep doing.
Yeah.
You can't sit back.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's why you're a great activist. It's never enough. Never.
Well, I wouldn't say never enough, but what you can do, you can.
Right.
And should keep doing. That's keeping us alive.
Right. And everyone on this Zoom, I know almost everyone very well, has done their thing. It's beautiful. Lance, my Dr.
Okay.
Lance.
Thank you. Sorry. In a chat, I have put Shai Bernstein's interview with the FIDF. It is, in my opinion, amazing.
Yes.
Please listen to it.
Yeah, no, he is. Who, Steve Weil interviewed him?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. No, Shai is something. On that note, everybody have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbat, and my blessings to Tova for a refuah Mi sheberach avotenu mekor habracha leimotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, renewal of body, renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Just before we go, last word from Leza as usual. Leza, you still there? My Leza?
Yeah, I'm here.
What's the last
I'm
word, my Rebbe?
The last words are always, I love you.
I love you, Leza. Shabbat shalom to everybody. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.